The author has a reputation for targeting the rich and famous in his investigative books. His latest target is a former Prime Minister who fits all the criteria and who certainly has a very controversial legacy. It is, of course, Tony Blair. Tom Bauer's latest work, Broken Vows, Tony Blair, The Tragedy of Power, has stories of conspiracy, deals and money-making. I spoke to Tom Bauer a little earlier tonight and started by asking him which promises he felt Tony Blair had broken during his time in office.
That he would be honest, that he would be whiter than white, purer than pure, and be totally candid with the British people.
And you don't feel he was?
No.
What would you point to in particular?
Well, I think that Iraq was a dishonest war in the sense that he didn't tell the truth for more than a year of what his real plan was and his sentiment. But I think that Iraq was just was not an aberration, that his policies on health, education, immigration, welfare, he wasn't candid with what he was actually doing.
In Iraq, in your section on Iraq, I mean, you make the serious allegation that not just the decision to go to war, but the manner in which we went to war meant that British soldiers died unnecessarily.
Because in a nutshell, he had decided soon after 9/11 that he wanted regime change in Iraq. He'd been bombing Iraq since 1998 with Bill Clinton. And he knew that regime change, the removal of Saddam, was illegal in British law. So he then went for WMDs. And he then pretended, in my view, that he could get somehow the UN resolution to send inspectors back in. But throughout that year, 2002, as America was preparing for war, Blair was undoubtedly supporting the invasion, but he did not tell his civil servants, he did not tell the army outrightly what his plan was, and all the rest of the preparations were very late.
Well, he did make it clear that that was his final resort. That was the position that he felt we might be forced into. And he would say that he made his case to Parliament, Parliament voted with him, and he made his case to the country. And as we know, many people disagreed, as they showed on that demonstration on the 15th of February.
Yes, but that was September, when he put it to Parliament for the vote for the first time with the dossier, and then the vote in February. Well, that was pretty late to send 42,000 soldiers 5,000 miles across the world to Iraq.
Yeah, but I mean, all I'm saying is it won't come as a surprise to anybody that Tony Blair thought we might end up going to war. I mean, everybody knew that.
Well, they didn't. I mean, the truth is they didn't, because
well, why were they demonstrating on the streets?
Well, that was in February, but that's a month before the invasion.
That was at the end of a culmination of a series of demonstrations.
Yes, but I mean, the truth is that Stephen Wall, for example, a very senior civil servant, told Chilcot that until January 2003, after sitting in nearly every cabinet meeting throughout the previous year, he had only then realised that Blair was planning to go to war. And there's no doubt that most people in the cabinet only realised just 2 months before, that in fact that was his plan. He says it now. He didn't say it.
Well, they must be quite dim, because I was covering it at that period, and I think it was pretty clear that they were always preparing for that. Indeed, I remember having a conversation in the British Embassy in Washington on precisely this issue, that they thought they could get a second resolution. They didn't, but the consequences were well understood.
There's no doubt that people in the American end of it, in the British Embassy in Washington, realised there was war, but they weren't in touch with the cabinet.
Yeah.
Blair did not give the cabinet the papers and the information which would have informed them, and that is one of the accusations against him, that he was keeping it not only quiet from his cabinet ministers, but from civil servants and also from the military until very late.
As you know, Tony Blair's office have taken your book to heart, or at least the serialisation in the Mail. They say this is exactly as we expected, a squalid, distasteful and pathetic exercise in recycling garbage, unsurprisingly serialised and sensationalised in the Mail. From what we've already seen, it is ridiculed with invention and inaccuracy.
I'm going to dignify with the replies.
You're probably going to put that in your paperback.
Well, but the paperback is just so stupid. 200 people gave me interviews. Generals, ministers, civil servants, the lot.
Yeah.
Mostly on the record. All people who worked with Blair. Yeah. All the quotations are named and sourced. He doesn't like it when the truth comes and bites him.
But as you know, I talked to you when you were preparing this book. What surprised me reading the extracts was how much of it was opinion and how little of it was documentarily different from what is already on the record? I mean, you can argue about it, but it is opinion, isn't it?
No, I mean, the book is not opinion. The book is
well,
fact.
It's quotations of 200 interviews. That's opinion.
Well, it's people know it. It's the people saying what happened when they were for 10 years serving Tony Blair. So, for example, on immigration, it is civil servants saying they went to see Blair in 1998 and were staggered that he wasn't interested in immigration. It is the fact that you didn't know that Mike Boyce, the Chief of the General Defence Staff, was fired on the eve of war. That is a fact. Now, the way the Mail writes it for their digest is different than my book.
But you know that, this is one of the things that, again, the office of Blair has reacted to. You've got a quote saying that he was a useless peace envoy.
By the Abu Abbas.
That's what you quote him as.
Abbas, no, the Abbas, yes.
What they say, it's true, some of those around the Palestinian leadership have been critical of Mr. Blair. This is because he disagrees strongly with them over their political strategy. I mean, again, what I'm saying is, if you disagree with Tony Blair, you're going to say he's useless, but that doesn't mean he was useless, does it?
Well, he was useless in Israel. I mean, the peace envoy was a disaster. I mean, he used it for his own political and personal and business purposes. He didn't actually achieve anything other than remove a couple of roadblocks. For 7 years.
I mean, again, they say, in reaction to your book, that he doesn't blur the lines between his charity work and his money-making activities, that he never, for example, sought a business contract with the government of Nigeria.
Well, first of all, they didn't do it in reaction to the book. It was in reaction to the serial, because they hadn't read the book when they published it.
No.
And the serial is very different to the book, believe me. And in terms of Nigeria and his...
It's your words, though, isn't it? I mean, it's got Tom Barr.
It has, but the way it's written. So, for example, it didn't have the names of the people who were the sources for him offering the president of Nigeria the sale of Israeli drones. Yeah. He was in his office. There was a man called Lai who was the liaison person for Blair, and he heard the president come out and say that Tony Blair, who had come in there ostensibly to talk about African governance and the Faith Foundation, offered him Israeli drones for sale. Now, that was a fact. Now, the way that...
someone's saying that's what they heard in the conversation.
Exactly. He heard it from Blair. Yeah, the president comes out and says he's offering Israeli drones. He didn't manufacture that. That isn't conjecture or whatever.
But what he's saying is that he never sought a business contract.
Well, selling Israeli drones is what, Faith Foundation, or what do you call it, government initiative?
As a result of this, again in the Mail, Sir Max Hastings has said if he met Tony Blair, he wouldn't shake his hand. Do you think that's an appropriate?
No, I personally wouldn't go that far. I mean, I think that... What I think about, and that's why it's called the tragedy of power, I think the great tragedy of Tony Blair is that he came in on a huge wave of goodwill, vast approval. He had huge number of opportunities to change Britain for the good. After 10 years, he was kicked out by his own party. There's enormous animus against him, so it's a terrible missed opportunity and a great loss for Britain. I don't care about Blair the man. I'm sure he's very charming and a great communicator. He has many flaws. I'd shake his hand. I'd like to sit and talk to him. It doesn't matter if he didn't or doesn't want to. But the point is he's got to explain why he left Britain, in the view of the majority of Britons, a worse place than when he found it.
Do you think that's the view of the majority of Britons? Would you take health and education, for example?
I think you read the book, you'll see in health and education the achievements he claims were not fulfilled. It was far worse.
Tom Barr, thank you.
Pleasure.
Let's take a look at the weather now.